I want to introduce to you the very first presentation. It has to do with the I-35 NEX project here in Texas. And as they come to the stage, I'm going to tell you who's going to be joining me here. Daniel Worden is the project manager for the I-35 NEX project with the Texas Department of Transportation. He served with the Texas Department of Transportation for going on 20 years, and he is joined by Marco Galindo, and he's the alternative project delivery supervisor with the Texas Department of Transportation, and he served there since 2008. Last but not least is Felix Martin. He's CEO of Alamo NEX Construction, who serves as the project director, who's responsible for a very complex design, construction, and maintenance of a $1.5 billion I-35 NEX Central project. The reason we've invited these folks here goes to the collaboration part, goes to the unity part. We're not just industrial, we're not just commercial, we're not just healthcare, we're not just oil and gas or chemical or pharma or automotive or consumer non-durable. One of the biggest spending packages in the history of our country has just gone out, and infrastructure and addressing the challenges there are a vital part of our industry. They use skills crafts too. They feel the workforce pinch too. They use civil engineers and construction managers, and so they're a part of the fabric of our great industry. And gentlemen, we welcome you today. Let's show our appreciation for their being here. Thank you.
Get back one. Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. First off, on behalf of TxDOT and Alamo NEX Construction, we really want to thank Mr. Palmer and the CURT Selection Committee for inviting us to present on this I-35 NEX, or Northeast Expansion Project, to this group. This project, which was already mentioned, it's the largest project in the San Antonio district, the largest that the district has ever undertaken, and it's an extremely important project to San Antonio, the South Texas region, with I-35 being a major trade and traffic corridor, serving over 200,000 travelers per day, coming through the San Antonio region. And future traffic is just expected to increase significantly. So bottom line, this is a very important project to the district and to all of our stakeholders. We hope you find some value in this presentation and our unique perspectives on this project. All right, so we've already been introduced, so we'll skip this one. All right, kind of the outline of the presentation. I'm going to be talking about the overall NEX project and some of the background. Marco's going to focus on kind of the currently under construction NEX Central project, along with some of the project perspectives from the TxDOT point of view. And Felix, lastly, is going to be talking about the NEX Central project from the contractor perspective. And then, of course, at the end, we'll have a question and answer session. All right, so where is the NEX project? So for those of you who aren't familiar with the San Antonio region, the slide here on the left kind of shows the 30,000-foot project location relative to Central South Texas region. As you can see, it traverses 3 counties in our region. Then you zoom in kind of to the graphic on the right, and you see a view of Northeast San Antonio. So just for perspective, picture downtown, kind of where we are on the bottom left of this map. So the project begins on the south end at Walter Street. It includes 2 direct connectors at the 410 South interchange. And then the project continues north and includes 4 direct connectors at the 410 North interchange. The terminology on our interchange naming is a little bit confusing. but those two roadways run as dual designation. So that's why we refer to them as 410 South and 410 North. Then the project continues up to the north, kind of some long linear construction up to the Loop 1604 interchange. It includes 4 direct connectors from the elevated lanes down to the 1604 existing main lanes. And the project runs up through Guadalupe and Comal counties, and it terminates at FM 1103 for roughly a 20-mile stretch of project. All right, need and purpose of the project. So this came directly from the NEPA document that was approved. This project will improve safety and mobility. These two things kind of go hand in hand. Inherently, when congestion is reduced, the safety of the corridor is increased. Also, this project will address anticipated growth in traffic. So as I mentioned earlier, the current traffic is roughly 200,000 vehicles per day, and it's anticipated to double by the year 2044, which is kind of our traffic modeling horizon year. Also, this project will reduce travel time for drivers. This is closely related to the reduction in congestion, and I'm gonna have a slide a little bit later that gives some details on that reduced travel time. Also, the project will serve regional traffic. This is roughly a 20-mile long stretch of roadway that's gonna have very minimal access points, and I've got another slide here in just a little bit that will highlight that. This roadway is intended for longer distant commutes, so basically when you get up on those elevated lanes, you're gonna be on them for quite a while. All right, some of the high-level project details. As you can see from the typical section on the bottom of the slide, the capacity will be added to I-35 through these elevated lanes, and they'll generally be built between the existing main lanes and the existing frontage roads. And they'll consist of additional 3 lanes in each direction, 2 general purpose or free lanes, and 1 HOV lane. So if you've ever driven this section I-35, you know that it's a very urbanized, very built out facility. And you could imagine if this facility was a 3-lane expansion at grades, what an impact it would have to all the adjacent businesses and property owners along the corridor. So the option to add capacity through the elevated lanes was chosen. Also, I want to note that the existing infrastructure, the main lanes, frontage roads, ramps, cross streets, they'll all generally remain as they are today. And basically, the elevated lanes will be added as another level to I-35. Okay, so this map highlights a number of different things that I want to touch on. First off, how this ultimate I-35 NEX project has been divided out into more manageable breakout projects. And those are to some of the complexities of the project, the magnitude, some of the risk factors of the project, and project funding. So the project has been broken out to what you see on the very north end of the map, which is the North project, which we call the North Bookend project. And that project will be delivered as a traditional design bid build project. Then a little bit further to the south, the Central project was broken out, which Marco will be talking a little bit more about here in just a minute. And then the South project, which goes from the 410 North interchange all the way down to Walter Street, has been further broken out into the South design build and 2 South design bid build projects. Also, I want to highlight on this slide, as I mentioned earlier, this is a very limited access facility. And as you can see by the graphic, the yellow circles denote those access points. So this isn't your typical urban freeway where you have access every mile or so. These are spread out to where you have access, it averages out to every 3 to 4 miles. Also, I want to point out on this slide that we have added some emergency service turnarounds. They're kind of the double-sided arrows that you see inside the white boxes. And these are bridges that connect the northbound and southbound elevated lanes, and they'll be operated by a retractable gate that can be operated remotely to allow EMS to access the opposite direction quickly if needed to access an emergency in the opposite direction. All right, now to talk a little bit about the distribution of the traffic. So this will kind of speak to the existing and the anticipated distribution of traffic along the corridor. And I'm only going to talk of the southbound direction. The northbound direction is very similar. So as you can see, the bar on the left shows the existing main lane traffic on I-35 southbound, which is roughly 97,000 vehicles per day. And the frontage road volume is roughly 27,000 vehicles per day. So fast forward to when this project is put into service, you can see that the 35 main lane volume actually drops down to about 82,000 vehicles per day. The frontage road traffic stays roughly the same at about 27,000. But you'll notice that the elevated lane traffic will be carrying roughly 40,000 vehicles per day. So that's roughly a third of the drivers on I-35 coming through this project will use the elevated lanes. Okay, now this is the expected travel time savings, or why are we doing the project? So you can see the bar on the left shows the existing main lane travel time from the very north end of the project all the way down to the very south end of the project, which is roughly an 18-mile travel. So currently, it would take you 29 minutes, kind of during the peak period, to travel from FM 3009 all the way down to Walter Street. So fast forward to when this project is implemented, that same commute on those same existing main lanes, due to the unloading of the traffic onto the elevated lanes, would be roughly 17 minutes. And if you were to take the elevated lanes through that stretch of roadway, you'd be looking at roughly a 15.5-minute commute. So you're looking at a travel time improvement anywhere from 41 to 48%. Okay, so now some of the advanced efforts that helped eliminate some of the project uncertainties. So first, the schematic and environmental document readiness. So the schematic is what governs the basic configuration of the corridor. It provides the design criteria, et cetera, and it has to be completely and thoroughly vetted out for the contractor to be able to submit a bid on this project. The NEPA document also can be a major roadblock for us if it's not approved. So that schematic environmental document was approved prior to contract execution for this project. Also, the interstate access justification report and the design exceptions approval certainty. So anytime we change access to the interstate, an interstate highway, we have to satisfy FHWA requirements for operation and safety along the corridor. Anytime we can't meet design criteria, we have to get design exceptions approved by FHWA. So that IJR and those design exceptions were progressed to where certainty approval was not a risk to the contractor on this project. Also, right-of-way acquisition, which basically is the physical land that's required to construct these improvements. We did have some right-of-way acquisition on the project, and all right-of-way was in possession prior to contract execution. Also, utility coordination efforts. We have to get utilities out of the way before we can build the project. So early meetings to inform the utility companies along the corridor of the planned improvements and the schedule of improvements. So that preliminary coordination with all those affected utility entities happened during the schematic phase. Also, advanced utility agreements with those really long lead utilities. So TxDOT decided to keep certain utility agreements in-house rather than contractor-managed agreements. So we retain the risk for standard utility agreements and relocations for those long lead CPS transmission lines, which take roughly 18 months lead time to get those relocated. And we also kept a utility agreement for San Antonio Pipeline, which is a high-pressure pipeline for jet fuel directly to the airport. And that's about a 12-month lead time. So we did all that in advance. And lastly, Union Pacific Railroad's advanced coordination and the development of the Exhibit A. So the Exhibit A's are basically the design of the bridge layouts that span the UPRR right-of-way. Those were advanced as far as possible to receive concept approval prior to contract execution. All right, so this is a timeline. So one of the main things that we want to highlight here is that these projects don't just happen overnight. This project has officially been on the books from 2013, and some of the early planning dated way back before that. So the column on the left is kind of looking back, what have we done on the project, and the column on the right is forward-facing schedule, basically where are we going. So in 2013, a preliminary environmental linkage study was done to determine the feasibility of the project. In 2015, that effort was carried to a full schematic and environmental and was approved as a toll project. In 2019, the project was reevaluated, and a result of a statewide focus of moving away from tolls, the toll component was removed from the project. In 2021, the Central Design Build project was awarded. 2022, all phases of the South and North project have begun. In 2023, we plan to award all South and North projects. And from 2023 to 2028, it's basically just a continuous construction. And we plan to have all projects open to traffic by 2028. So as you can imagine, there's going to be a lot of moving parts between all of these projects kind of going on at the same time. So very close coordination will need to happen between these project teams. All right, so at this point, I'd like to hand the presentation off to Marco. He's going to be talking about the NEX Central project, which I mentioned earlier is kind of the middle project in that ultimate configuration. So I'd like to hand it over to Marco.
Thanks, Daniel. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're enjoying your time here in San Antonio, and if you've gotten a chance or haven't gotten to, I encourage you to go take a walk on the Riverwalk or even check out the Alamo. And a local tip, you slip the guy a $5 bill, he'll show you the door to the basement. So we'll go ahead and take a closer look here at the
Big button.
There we go. All right. So the 35 NEX Central project, like Daniel mentioned, it's currently under construction with the project limits shown on the graphics from Interstate 410 all the way to FM 3009. The contractor, design build contractor is Alamo NEX Construction, also referred to as ANC. And it's a joint venture between Ferrovial Construction US and Weber LLC. Design started back in 2021, and construction picked up in last summer of 2022, and we hope to have the project completed in 2027. The project cost is $1.5 billion, with roughly about $1 billion for the construction portion of the project. So talking a little bit more about the design build delivery. Traditionally, for our bid build projects, TxDOT will design the project, put that out for letting, get a contractor to build. The design build, the contractor or the developer would perform the design and construction simultaneously. And this allows for some of these bullet points here with streamlining processes and reducing cost and project schedules, giving the agility to adapt to design obstacles and allowing input from the construction team and suppliers during the design. It also fosters innovation. So the way I like to explain it is kind of like having a puzzle. And traditional bid build, you get all the instructions step by step and you put it together. Where design build, they just give you the puzzle and allow your creativity and innovation to kind of put that together. And because I-35 NEX project is a large, complex project, we opted for the design, build, delivery for this one. So here's the project. The cones here kind of denote the active construction zones currently. The way ANC approached the project, they broke it up into 4 small segments, 2 in the south, 2 in the north. Currently, all 4 segments of the project have active construction along the southbound direction, with northbound starting later this year. So we have everything from demo of retaining walls, bridges, sawmill construction, detours, and of course the bridge construction ongoing. So here, give you an idea of September 2022, we broke ground with the actual drill shaft bridge foundations. So the first one of about 1,500s was drilled in September. They kind of vary in diameters, including 10-foot mono shafts, and they vary in depth, with some being as deep as 120 feet. So, there's other items that we kind of contend with, which of course is expansive soils in the area. We have water tables and even karst features that may create voids in some of these foundations. We've also started construction of some of the footings for the bridges as well. And here's another picture of our first columns are going up as well. Last handful been done last month, and we anticipate that production to ramp up as the project progresses. Picture there on the left gives you a good idea of all the formwork, form liners, steel, concrete that's going to go into this project. And on the right, we have our hill country aesthetic design. So the San Antonio district has an aesthetic detail guide depending on the side of town that we're in. So this project covers a mission theme and also a hill country theme. So that picture on the right is an actual picture. It's not an Instagram filter. So hopefully you get to enjoy a sunrise or sunset here in Texas. So people are starting to see the vertical construction go, but there's also a lot of other issues that the project team has to contend with. Like Daniel said, there's a lot of traffic, very busy corridor, urbanized, and one of the items we deal with is just aging pavement. So small potholes, removal of striping can kind of evolve into bigger issues. Also having to deal with a lot of debris on the road, crashes, damage to guardrail signs. So keeping up with that is a daily task. Most of the work is behind concrete barriers, so the workers are protected, but there's also a lot of work that takes place with lane closures. And so in order to reduce impacts to traffic, that work is done during night. And as y'all might be aware, nighttime work can cause a lot of issues. Crews have to be kind of on their toes and aware, maintain their situational awareness, and people are up to all kinds of extracurricular activities at night, so that adds an extra level of concern for us. But there's also other issues such as illegal dumping, a lot of trash and debris that we go through and try to maintain the roadways clean, and next thing you know, a pickup comes by and all kinds of stuff flies out of the bed, right? So that's an ongoing process for the project team to be able to keep up with this during the day and at night, and even having people make themselves at home in our work site. So that requires a lot of communication and coordination to prepare all these lane closures and activities. So our specifications did provide a lane rental bank that designates a dollar value to each closure depending on the time of day for the contractor to perform operations, and also the facility, whether it's a frontage road, a ramp, a full closure, single, double lane closure. And the contractor is responsible for giving us 14, 21-day advance notice. So on a project of this scale, you can assume, things may change daily with the weather, like last week's events, or we just have to have some kind of flexibility. So our previous traditional format of Setting up all these closures was filling out a form, sending out emails, a lot of back and forth, so we had to develop a way to streamline that process. So a work zone management app was created that would facilitate that communication and coordination with the contractor and the public as well. So the app has resolved a lot of those outdated processes. It also creates databases, ways to be able to track the times of these closures and manage the lane rental bank. And it also gives you a visual and helps review some of these lane closures for any kind of conflicts that may be existing. And so, like I said, communication is a big part of it, so keeping the community engaged is also a big task. So both ANC and TxDOT and our consultant partners invest a lot of time in keeping the community informed and engaged as well too. So there's newsletters that go out, e-blast, emails, text, and a project website that everybody can go to for information, as well as using our drivetexas.org app and our TransGuide cameras and DMS systems throughout town. Also providing a lot of presentations to neighborhood associations, to different communities, church groups, you name it. We reach out to them just to make sure that we address any issues that come up. So the project does traverse 2 counties, Bexar County and Guadalupe County, as well as 5 municipalities. You can see up here on the graphic: Selma, Live Oak, Schertz, Universal City, and the city of San Antonio. So we do have really good relationships with those entities. We have spots on their newsletters, also on their websites where people can go and get the latest and greatest information. We also, as mentioned, have Union Pacific Railroad coming through the project, and a multitude of utilities, including water lines, gas lines, overhead lines that require a lot of coordination. Has already been done, but it also kind of creates a issue for some of the design elements, trying to minimize impacts to those utilities while maintaining our project geometry. And the last one being other projects in the region. We're blessed to have a robust program here in Texas and the San Antonio district. And so we have a lot of projects ongoing currently. And here the graphic shows you some of the major projects in the area that have not only in dollar value, but also the impact to the commuter traffic. So we try to stay ahead and coordinate some of these major impact closures with other project teams to make sure that we avoid major gridlocks and impacts to the traffic throughout town. We also utilize smart work zone systems and queue detection that allow for travelers to try to find alternate routes, as well as our TransGuide DMS system for people coming up 35 into town, up 37, to be able to find alternate routes during these activities. And Felix will touch a little bit more on how that also has an impact on our project, on the workforce as well. So here's some perspective on the project, also call it some fun facts. We're gonna have about 580 design packages, on average about 50 sheets, so enough to build blueprints for about 29,000 houses. About 5.9 million square feet of bridge deck, or 126 football fields. About 1,500 drill shafts, an average depth of about 50 feet, so that's half of the distance of the English Channel Tunnel, and 1,140 bridge columns, so roughly about the height of 36 Empire State Buildings. As far as the beams go, plenty of beams for this bridge project. Concrete, we have about 4,712 beams, which could easily span from here to Corpus Christi if you were to line them up. And about 83 steel bridge beams, so roughly about the length of a golf course. So to give you a little bit more insight into the ANC's perspective on the project, Felix will be presenting to you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is, thank you, Marco. My name is Felix Martin, and I'm the project director for Alamo NEX Construction, a joint venture between Ferrovial and Weber. I would like to start by highlighting some of the challenges that we are seeing on a project from the contractor's perspective. Starting first at a macro level, and not any different than in any other industry, we are suffering the uncertainty and the volatility that we are seeing across the world, and that is definitely having an impact on our supply chain. We are experimenting material shortages, shortage of truck drivers. We are suffering from the increase in oil prices and the increase also in the prices of other commodities. This increase in commodities are affecting the cost of our construction materials, such as steel, cement, aggregates, and in general, any concrete product. And last, obviously, as we saw last week, the unemployment rate hit a 53-year low, and that's definitely also impacting our ability to hire not only the workforce for the field, but also to find the talent that we need to fill the office personnel positions. Talking about the specifics of the project, as Daniel said, basically this project consists on building 2 bridges, 10 miles long each. So as you can imagine, most of the budget, above 70% of the budget, is for the construction of these 2 bridges. Marco touched base on that as well. It's a very repetitive project. We are building the same elements over and over, right? I mean, over 1,000 drill shafts, 1,000 columns, 1,000 caps, almost 5,000 concrete girders. So again, very repetitive process. If we are talking about safety challenges or safety risks, for sure, as you can imagine, mainly related to fall hazards and working at height, but also a huge risk for us as a contractor and for the TxDOT workers as well, is working next to high speed and a high volume of traffic. I think Daniel mentioned that we have above 200,000 vehicles a day. Also, as you can see in the cross-section on the right-hand side, we are constrained between the existing frontage road and the existing main line, so our working areas are very limited, which brings another set of additional operational and safety challenges. And then the last thing that I would like to point out, and I think Daniel mentioned this as well, we are making an effort to try to keep the existing infrastructure as is. So one of the challenges throughout the entire design stage was to play with the horizontal and vertical alignment of those 2 elevated bridges to try to minimize the impacts to the existing infrastructure. So how are we tackling these challenges? I would like to introduce first a concept that I'm sure some of you are very familiar with it, which is what we have called the project industrialization. Usually in a heavy civil or a transportation construction project, we are building many different elements under very different conditions, under a changing environment, and also using different construction methodologies. However, on this project, because of the repetitive nature of it and the fact that we are experimenting a shortage of labor and all the other challenges that I described, we felt that having like an industrialized approach or a mass production approach was the best solution to tackle some of these challenges. How did we get this accomplished? It all starts during the design stage by standardizing and simplifying the different technical solutions and construction elements. We think that this later on will translate into being able to standardize also the operations on the field, make those operations as repetitive as possible, being able to, in a way, mechanize them or even automatize them, which hopefully will drive our labor productivity up and therefore will lower the demand for on-site resources in the project. Obviously, as you can imagine, this comes at a cost. It becomes to a trade-off analysis or decision-making process between fully optimizing the volumes of the elements or the design dimensions versus being able to standardize all these different elements to one single size if we take things to the extreme. We feel that on this project we have reached a reasonable balance between those two, optimization versus standardization. But obviously, again, because we were aware of the shortage on resources and the supply chain disruptions, on this project we lean more towards the standardization solution. One of the big benefits of us being able to standardize some of these construction elements is that we have been able, or we are in the process of taking half of the production of some of these elements to an off-site facility to be done by a prefabricator that on top of that it's actually a local prefabricator. Some of the benefits, as you can imagine, are almost unlimited. We are bringing additional resources to the project. We are doing an operation in a more controlled environment that increases the safety, the quality of the project. It minimizes the impacts to the traveling public because now we are building a portion of the project in an off-site facility. And very important, we are mitigating the uncertainty of our schedule. We feel that today, by prefabricating some of these items in an off-site facility while we are working on site on other elements, our schedule has a higher degree of reliability. And the last thing that I would like to mention is that, of course, this process wouldn't be possible without having a seamless collaboration and cooperation, not only between our construction team and our design team, but also engaging our prefabricators, our suppliers, subcontractors, the whole supply chain into the design process. One thing I would like to mention is that many times we design these projects hoping that they can be built later, and we feel that that process is backwards. We should for sure understand before design starts, understanding what do we want to design, but the other input needs to be how do we want to build it. We shouldn't start design without knowing how we are going to build the project. Another critical concept for us and to de-risk a project of this scale and complexity is digitalization or the use of technologies. As probably you know, construction in general, but for sure the transportation construction industry is lagging behind other industries in terms of labor productivity, performance and growth. So one of the industry trends today is the use of technologies. That is definitely changing the way we do business. And for us, at Alamo NEX, it has been a huge driver for productivity growth and to generate or increase the efficiency of our internal processes. To put things in perspective, we have around 200 people in our office. TxDOT has around 30 people in the office. We are both fully co-located, and we actually share, we are all co-located in the same building. But we also have above 250 designers working remotely on design consultants' offices across US. Eventually, at peak time, we'll have over 1,000 field employees. We are pretty much have new hires every single week and many moving parts. We feel that today digitalization or the use of technologies, in my opinion, is not a plus anymore. It's a must if we want to stay competitive as a contractor and if we want to have a more connected project with less risk. Some of the things or the technologies that we are using, we have a cloud-based platform for all of our work in progress and final design files. So consultants, the design team, the utilities team, survey, and so forth, all work from the same platform. We have a project management tool that integrates the whole team, environmental, quality, safety, again, design, construction. We actually use that tool to communicate with the client, to communicate also with the supply chain, and thanks to that is what we call connecting the dots of the project, right? But we are also using artificial intelligence for our field crews to do the daily job hazard analysis every day on the field. We are using augmented reality, where with a small GPS antenna and a tablet, we can visualize on site the 3D model and even look at the existing underground utilities in real time. Of course, today we are, I mean, it wasn't that long ago, at least in the transportation construction industry, that we were doing paper timesheets. Today, we are using electronic timesheets, and the benefits, again, are unlimited. We are talking about an increase in collaboration and cooperation across departments, more transparency, sharing the information between the different departments that we have in the project. What else? We have seen that the information today flows better. It's an information of better quality, information in real time. It's what we call the single source of truth. We are all using the same information as input, and therefore less subject to errors. And in general, for sure, this has driven our productivity up. And then I would like to touch base also on a few other items that, in our opinion, are critical to reduce the complexity or reduce the uncertainty of a project of this size. I think Daniel mentioned this. I think TxDOT has done a great job on taking care of some of these long lead time items well before even the project was procured during the planning and development stage. Daniel said local, state, federal, and environmental permitting approval, the relocation of a very large transmission line that will take years to relocate, for sure the acquisition of right-of-way and so forth. In terms of our approach to the project and to the schedule as a contractor and for this type of mega projects, we like to break down the complexity of the project into smaller projects. So what we have done is we have broken down the project into 17 different design segments and 4 different construction segments. Each construction segment has its own project manager. We try to allocate independent resources to each of these construction segments. And the idea behind this is, or the goal, is that these construction segments happen in parallel with each other in a concurrent manner. Obviously, then at the project level, we have an organization that manages all those 4 construction segments for consistency purposes and make sure that each segment is not doing things in a different way. So, I mean, it's a coordinated effort, but when it comes to resources, we try to make them independent from each other. And then our procurement approach supports that strategy. We like to bring, obviously, as many resources as possible. When we make the analysis on the resources that are going to be needed, we always try to add buffers to those and bring more resources than what the theoretical calculation tell us. And what we like to do, the thought process is we start first by trying to maximize the use of local resources. Obviously, those guys have the crews that are local to San Antonio. They have the local knowledge about the local conditions, but they also have the experience of working with our clients. So that's step number 1 in the process. And then we complement the needs with out-of-town or out-of-state suppliers and subcontractors that hopefully have worked with us in other projects across the nation. Obviously, something very important for us is diversification. Make sure that we don't put all the eggs into the same basket. This is today even more importantly, given the supply chain disruptions. And something very important for us, and that we are actually trying to expand, again, because of the current circumstances, is the retaining a portion of the project as a self-perform, to be done with internal resources. We are trying to achieve a higher degree of vertical integration. Today we are precasting some of the traffic barrier, but we are also analyzing whether it makes sense for us to batch our own concrete and so forth. We feel that this is a contingency plan that is needed, that this is a way to support our subcontractors in case they are falling behind or they are having troubles. And in our opinion, is the only way for a contractor to become the owner of your own destiny, right? So something we are working on. And of course, we'll do it only if it makes sense. Like I said, step number one is to try to maximize the use of local suppliers. And that's everything I had, and I'll turn it over to Daniel.
All right, thank you, Felix. Thanks, Marco. As we kind of wrap this presentation up, you've heard a wealth of information, probably more than you want to hear on the project, and you've heard some of the major challenges that we currently face and will continue to face throughout the life of this project. But to this point, I think we've been successful in being able to mitigate a bunch of the issues and challenges, as Felix has discussed. We've been proactive in identifying and collaborating as a team to find the best solutions. So with that, I hope that we've been able to successfully articulate this presentation in a way that highlights the project and our perspectives on this extremely important project to the San Antonio District. Thank you. Well, Sorry, one last thing. So there are many ways to stay informed on the project. I believe y'all will have access to this presentation. So there's a lot of good information contained in these links if you want to find out more about the project. All right.
These folks don't have time to be here, as you can tell. And so let's show our appreciation once again for the terrific information. So I will tell you, we have 4 dozen questions. We have way more questions than we have time for. So I'll try to pick out a few that are more salient and ask you to share as I share. What does the automation of means and methods mean? And maybe that goes to you, Felix.
Yeah, so like I said, I mean, normally in a transportation construction project, we are building many different elements, so work is usually very labor intense, very manual. I mean, let's put as an example those precast caps that goes on top of the columns and below the concrete girders. When we are talking about doing many different sizes, we need to pre-assemble the concrete forms, assembly them, pour the concrete, de-assembling them, and change again the process over and over to adjust for different dimensions. When we are talking about automation, is making the process more repetitive at a cost of not being able to optimize the dimensions. We are standardizing those, make it more repetitive and more automatized. Going to the industrial world, usually, for instance, we do the decks, have a concrete precast slab that usually gets installed one by one with a traditional crawler crane or a traditional telescopic crane. What we are trying to do on this project is fully standardizing those. We are going to try to set up a gantry crane, more similar to what we will use on an industrial facility, and try to automatize the installation of those panels. So that's the entire concept. Instead of optimizing the volumes and the design dimensions, standardizing those so we can make the operations on the field more repetitive and actually use some of the industrial methods.
Thank you. For Marco, with a project of this size, how do you maintain a safe and healthy job site? How do you maintain positivity and camaraderie among the team in harsh working conditions, especially during a Texas summer?
Well, there's a lot of factors to that. Yeah, it gets pretty hot. So really, it starts just with communication. We have a lot of eyes out on the field. I think every single employee, whether it's for Alamo NEX or TxDOT or a consultant, is empowered with calling a timeout, speaking up without being afraid of retribution or whatnot, and just having those weekly and daily tailgates, meetings, having the open communication. I mean, I've seen set up, we haven't gotten to a big summer yet, like production-wise, like we will this summer, but I've seen tents that go up and cooling stations set up for people to kind of take a break and yeah, because that's always a big concern, whether it's on this project or any other project, where it's a contractor or a TxDOT employee. But really just that communication and keeping them engaged, because I think a lot of the staff is well aware that everything, that no matter what job they have, it all contributes and it all matters to the project.
Thank you. Daniel, what were the factors that influenced the choice of design build or design bid build project delivery? What kind of analysis did you folks use?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've got a big process that we go through whenever we kind of factor whether we're going to go design build or design bid build. So some of the things that factor into it is just the overall size and complexities of the project, and whether there's any efficiencies that are going to be gained by the contractor being able to do the design and the construction. They're able to utilize their own means and methods. Also the risk factors go into it. What kind of risk is TxDOT willing to maintain, and what type of risk are we willing to share with the contractor? So those are just a few. Also, funding goes into it. How much money do we have to build a certain stretch of roadway? So that's also a big factor.
For all three of you, have you used any alternative recruiting methods to staff the project, like second chance programs, the underrepresented populations, et cetera? What kinds of creative recruitment initiatives have you launched, if any?
So I can start off. So we do have a DBE goal, which is a disadvantaged business enterprise goal that we have to meet contractually. A lot of those smaller firms actually can get in on these types of projects and kind of get a piece of the pie. So I don't know, Felix, if you have anything to add to that.
No, I mean, from the subcontractor community, obviously, it's the DBE. For us, for our self-perform workforce, I mean, we tap into different areas for sure. Veterans, I mean, we go to high schools, we go to career fairs, and we have an OJT program, on the job training program. So we hire unskilled laborers and train them on the job. So it's not secret sauce, unfortunately, but a combination of different ideas.
So Daniel, you mentioned the use of several consultants for this project. What kind of consultants are engaged, and were there any new types of consultants for this versus prior project?
Yeah, so how much time do we have on this? So pretty much throughout the full development of the project, we use consultants to develop the schematic and environmental effort. And then once we awarded the contract, we've got consultants that we use to help manage the day-to-day construction, help enforce the contract, kind of on the professional services side. And then we've got consultants more on the inspection, verification, and testing side that we utilize as well. So throughout the course of this project, I mean, we've engaged a number of consultants that have helped this project come to fruition.
For any of you, will the elevated lanes accommodate semis and large tractor trailers or just serve as express lanes for the vehicles?
So currently, we don't have any truck restrictions on the elevated lanes. We're going to open it up, open to the truck traffic. Because if you think about it, a majority of the trucks are more long haul, so they would be more of that regional type traffic. But if we do start experiencing issues, incidents involving trucks, we always have the flexibility to prohibit trucks up on the elevated lanes.
Have there been any sustainability considerations on project execution, like low carbon concrete or other materials that address the sustainability carbon capture concept? Any of the three of you?
So, I mean, we belong to a parent company that it's a public company, so for sure sustainability is a huge goal for us. Not specifically with the concrete, because at the end of the day, like I said, we are using or trying to use first local suppliers, but we are trying to for sure recycle as much as we can the materials, the demolition materials that we have in the concrete, in the project, sorry, talking about crushed concrete, talking about the asphalt millings that get used also to produce the permanent asphalt on the project. So yeah, recycling is a big thing for us.
Any other comments? How about any consideration for automated or robotic installations on the project? Any use of new and emerging AI?
So we are playing with it. We are engaged with a company that actually use robots to tie the river. So that's something that we've been looking at especially for the decks. That is probably the most repetitive river tying operation, but that's about it that I can think of.
What is the estimated amount of labor involved in the project, and how many of them are from Texas and how many from out-of-state groups? Are there a significant number of travelers on your project?
Labor, we are talking about over 1,000 laborers at peak time. Percentage-wise, I want to say that 99% of them will be from Texas, probably. Like I said, we'll bring some subcontractors and suppliers from out of state, but most of the workforce should be from Texas. And what was the other question, sorry?
Oh, I've got to scroll up and find it, Felix. How many are travelers? Like from other jurisdictions where you have to pay per diem?
We'll bring, I mean, for sure, some of our subs are located in Houston, Austin, so there will be some traveling involved, and there will be some per diem involved with that, for sure. Yeah.
You're suffering just like the industrial guys are suffering, no question about it. Moving on to fabrication and pre-assembly, what factors drove the decision to use only one prefabrication supplier, and how did you pre-qualify that supplier? Okay,
so on the concrete girders, we are actually using the three main concrete precast suppliers in Texas. The one supplier was for the precast caps, actually something not very common here in Texas. Normally, on the smaller projects, because we are talking about a lesser amount of bridge caps, we usually tend to do those cast in place. And this local supplier was the only one with experience on precast caps, and actually he's sitting 1 mile away from the project limits. But again, when we are talking about the concrete girders, we are using 3. When we are talking about precast panels, we are also using a couple. The comment about one single supplier was just for those precast caps.
And approximately what percentage of the work or the work hours have you been able to move to the prefab facility?
It's actually half of the precast caps. So we are talking about 1,000 caps, and we are doing 450. So 50% of the production of those elements.
Was there a percentage of total project cost that's budgeted for safety, including workforce safety?
Yes, for sure. We have a percentage. I mean, it's something proprietary. The way we bid projects, we put a percentage over the total revenue of the project.
How are you capturing best practices? And are you sharing best practices with other organizations around TxDOT?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do have some programmatic documents for these design build projects. So anytime that we have something innovative or a best practice that comes up, there's a committee that meets and discusses whether we want to include those kind of in those programmatic and kind of make that standardized to kind of how we operate.
Great. Are you using union or non-union labor or both? Is this prevailing wage? What does TxDOT require?
It's a non-union, and there is a federal requirement for prevailing wage.
Got it. What setbacks to date have you experienced, or any surprises, and what's been your response?
We have setbacks every week, and we work as a team to solve those. I mean, obviously, the supply chain has been the biggest thing since day one, and like I said, I mean, I think we've been able to solve some of those through the design stage.
To date, what has been your biggest aha moment or lesson learned that can be applied to future projects? That's a question for any of the three of you.
So I'll start. For us, it's a big challenge, the way that we've got our lane closure restrictions set up. I mean, the way we've got them set up is basically a night project. We strongly discourage any construction kind of during those peak periods. Also, a lot of the maintenance activities we did restrict to night work only. So I think we can probably do a little bit more thinking about how maybe we could do some work during the daytime hours that are non-peak period. But on 35, it's very difficult just due to the overall traffic volumes. Basically from the morning rush hour almost through the evening rush hour, it's a peak period time. So I think a little bit more thought could go into, when those construction windows are and how we can be a little bit more efficient with that.
Any other comments from the other two?
No, I mean, I will say I love the theme of the conference. We, as a contractor, we knew we were in the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity business, but we didn't know that it was going to be that challenging, and for sure, it's a big lesson learned, and being a resilient organization has become a must.
Indeed. Final question, and as I said, we had 4 dozen of these, of different questions, but do you foresee any material or supply shortages, and how are you planning for the shortages that might be foreseeable?
Yeah, we are seeing it already. Like I said, the cement, aggregates, those two are impacting any concrete product, and as you can imagine on our project, most of the materials or the biggest percentage of the budget goes to concrete products. What we are doing, it's a little bit of what I already said. We are trying to find substitutions for the materials. For instance, we are using concrete girders in lieu of steel girders. We do have a problem with concrete, but the problem with steel is even greater. We are using a lot of innovation through the design process to try to change or improve the design and try to lower the the project quantities. We are using a MOH, concept, which is try to fabricate the materials in advance, and we pay the suppliers to store those materials at their facilities. So again, there's no secret sauce, but just using a combination of ideas.
Excellent. And once again, let's show Daniel, Marco, and Felix our appreciation. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate it. Thank you.